Well, welcome everybody. This is the AALS section on technology, law, and legal education. And the next in our series of summer webinars. We've had some great webinars already, and we're really excited about today's. Thanks all for joining. We have a good turnout again. It's been really exciting to see all those who've joined and been part of these conversations. I'm going to just say a couple of things real quickly to get us started, and then I'll move out of the way for our great panelists today. My name's Jeff Ward. I'm a faculty member at Duke School of Law. I direct a Duke Center on Law and Technology, teach technology-related subjects, and these topics are really close to my heart. I have to say, since the very beginning, when we got proposals for this webinar series, I co-chaired this webinar section with Tara Wilkie. I've been really excited for this one. I loved the framing of it. I loved not only the what, but also the who's going to be sharing with us today, and I'm really excited about it. So I'll just real quickly introduce them. I'll just tell you how it's going to run. They're going to each present or share a little bit about their engagement with generative AI. They'll talk a little bit among each other. And then if you have questions, go ahead and at any point during the presentation, put those into the chat, and we'll be monitoring those as they go along. And hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end before 2:45 Eastern to pause and maybe have a conversation there. And then a few panelists might be able to stick around after 2:45 to have a chat in case any of you want to chat in that way. So great. With that, I just wanted to share our panelists today. So this the title of this presentation is Generative AI and the Future of Legal Education. I feel all of our ears perking up because we all have questions about what this means for the future of legal education. And I think, sense opportunity, and we also have some misgivings and some potential fears about that. So we're going to confront some of those today with Alice Armitage. Alice is a professor and director of applied innovation, including she oversees the Lex Lab at the University of California College of Law at San Francisco, has been involved in innovation topics, design topics, et cetera, for a long time. David Wang is the Chief Innovation Officer at Wilson Sonsini, also in the Bay Area. And so not only an innovation officer himself, but with an organization, a firm that serves many innovators. Jake Heller is the CEO and co-founder of Casetext. Casetext, of course, has been at the center of a lot of these moving parts. This is very much Jake's world, so we're very lucky to have him. And John Bliss is the assistant professor of law at the University of Denver's Sturm College of Law. And he's also an affiliate faculty member at the Harvard Law School Center on the Legal Profession. So with those very brief and inadequate introductions, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Alice. And please put your questions or comments in the chat, and I will monitor them. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate all the work you guys have put into having this webinar happen. And welcome to all of you. I think this is a very exciting topic. It is both exciting and a little terrifying, to be honest. And so we're hoping to go over a little of that today from all of our different perspectives. So as Jeff said, I have been teaching about law and technology since 2015. And so I've been following and discussing with students about how all the prior ways that AI has shown up in our lives, as well as other technology like blockchain, and how it's impacting the legal profession. And frankly, until recently, the impact of technology was muted in the legal profession. It did not really meet the expectations that we all had, and it certainly did not meet the hype that had come out about it. However, I think that all changed in November of 2022 when ChatGPT was released. For the first time, it gave those of us who are not, engineers, a sense of the real capabilities of artificial intelligence in terms of its ability to use, manipulate, produce language, as well as the way that we could all interact with it. And we didn't have to have any technical background. We could just ask it questions and it would respond to us in a conversational way. So that has, I believe, changed everything. I was already teaching about law and tech in the spring, and I've had to throw out my old syllabi and start again. And the students and I really learned about it together, and it was an incredible process for me as well as for them. They were all really grateful for this, teaching about what the weaknesses and the benefits of using ChatGPT. So, and this is all of this experience has led me to a certain perspective, and I just want to share that with you, as everyone I think on this panel will share their perspectives with you as well. So, why do I think that this new kind of AI is really going to impact the legal profession? Well, one, as I said, it's already doing many of the things that we do, and it's also improving so quickly. GPT-4, released only 3 months after ChatGPT, was considerably, markedly better. And it does, again, the things that I think that lawyers are all known for, I think it does it better. So what do I mean about that? Well, we're all really good at critical thinking. We're good at close, paying attention to detail and a close analysis of text. And we're very good at using precise language to explain our conclusions, argue for our particular point of view, et cetera. So before ChatGPT, there was no indication that artificial intelligence could do any of this, but it has. ChatGPT and GPT-4 have really undermined that conclusion. And because of that, I believe that it is going to be able to really take over many of the tasks that's involved in the practice of law. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we think about, from my point of view, the creation of law, the production of legal services was one, the nuanced idea and strategy of a partner, and two, all the production hours that associates have put in. So already, NDAs, demand letters, simple answers, straightforward motions can be done by AI. And in the future, they're going to do even more of it. So when our students graduate from law school, unlike in the past where those of us who went into practice spent years, a couple of years, reviewing the sorts of things that we would be doing. There would be contracts, documents, or document review for M&A, would be reading depositions, all the sorts of things that helped us go from the understanding of the concept and the doctrine of an area of practice to the actual ability to practice it. Well, that, I believe, is going to be eroded at law firms and in the practice of law, because generative AI will be doing a lot of that. And so I think that leaves a huge gap in the instruction of future lawyers. In the past, we've been able to rely on first jobs to get students from the critical thinking and doctrinal expertise that we teach to what you need to practice. That, I believe, will disappear. How soon? I don't know, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but I believe it will happen. And so I think we have to start thinking proactively about how to fill that gap. How can we help our students understand how to use technology in a way that's productive, that is both limited, it uses its benefits, but it also understands its limitations, and so therefore can provide better legal services, and also legal services to the many people now who can't afford them. Okay, that's my 5 minutes. I'm going to turn it over now to John, who is going to talk to you about his perspectives with teaching GPT.
Thanks so much, Alice. How does the screen share look?
Good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm a assistant professor of law. I teach first-year students in property law, and one of the things I did this semester was integrating AI in the curriculum. I've been working on some frontier AI projects the past couple of years. And what I wanted to share in my 5 minutes here is some thoughts about how I think we should be adapting in legal education, not just from my own perspective, but also I surveyed my students after they had used ChatGPT and some other generative AI software and for assignments in our first year class. And I also surveyed faculty. And so I just want to share a few of those perspectives very briefly, and then we can come back if this is a useful part of the discussion going forward. I think Alice already covered a lot of the sort of introductory notes I would have made on this first slide, but just to say, I think we should really embrace the uncertainty if GPT 3.5 to 4 is this huge jump in percentile on the bar exam and a lot of other abilities. I'll actually show you some survey questions where I've asked law faculty to adopt a forecaster's role and to try to think about where the tech might be going. And of course, this is zero-shot performance of these GPT systems without the advantages that, say, Case Text Co-Counsel has, actually providing some legal data for the systems. So student perspective. So I gave them quizzes where, to give you one example, they were asked to respond to a short essay prompt, but only to give me the response that they got from ChatGPT or other systems. This was optional. Every student opted in and gave me their essays. And really, it's a prompt engineering exercise. So you get an answer. Maybe it mentions a health and safety nuisance, but it doesn't mention some other elements. You're going back and forth with it, but then only giving me the sort of best response. This is a very kind of do-it-yourself ChatGPT style early experiment with what assignments like this could look like. I also had assignments where they evaluated ChatGPT outputs. And so to jump to their survey responses, on the open-ended answers, they described these first impressions with using and seeing the results of the GPT system as really shocking, amazing. They said they were blown away. It was freaky. Then they used it more and they actually got a little bit disappointed because it wasn't as good as it seemed. They weren't as awestruck, although then they started to learn some prompt engineering. And so I think this is useful both for them to catch up with a sense of what the capabilities are, but also to do some critical evaluation and see the limits. But I also tried to keep them updated throughout the semester, right? So I think it was easy early in the semester to say, well, ChatGPT can't do all these things or it's hallucinating so much. And I tried to update them about how GPT-4 was improved and how, what Casetext was doing and LexisNexis, et cetera. On the quantitative question, they did find it helpful. Most found it helpful for their learning that we use the AI. So this wasn't just a distraction. And most felt that all law students should be using these kind of systems. What they found useful about it was the kind of brainstorming phase of thinking through the sort of essay questions I was giving them. Downsides, some said that the AI is just not there yet. It wasn't good enough, but some had kind of the opposite response. It's too good, and it seems like it could be a crutch. So I think these are actually really key points of analysis for our thinking about how to integrate these tools in our teaching. Are the responses good enough to be useful, or are they in some sense too good? In any event, students, I think, did express a lot of demand to learn more, and they thought it would be stubborn and old-fashioned not to incorporate this. I don't actually see where I am on time, but let me know if I'm going too slow. Just say a couple things from the faculty survey. So I asked, as I mentioned, I asked the faculty to forecast, first off, AI's ability to assist lawyers. How likely is it that in the next decade we'll reach a point where the majority of US lawyers use AI systems to assist them with the majority of the professional tasks? I think I had a brief explainer on AI systems, but this is a histogram, but you can see from 50% up, most of the responses are in that range. And this is not a perfect sample, it's a convenient sample of a number of faculty. I certainly got some dissenting voices, some who said that AI is sort of not there yet, and they're really unconvinced. But most of these 140 faculty thought that was very likely that the majority of tasks would involve these kind of AI systems. And then I asked, what's the likelihood in that same period, the next decade, that AI is going to replace lawyers, more or less, that it would be capable, not that it would, but that it would be capable of competently carrying out most tasks performed by lawyers. And my graph disappeared. Well, I think the average was 30% likelihood there, so much lower, but 30% still quite significant if you're talking about something that spells such radical transformation in just the next decade. So actually, faculty were quite, in this survey, were quite supportive of the idea that we need to be teaching. Sorry, this question is how important it is that law schools offer students opportunities to use text generating AI systems. Very supportive of this. Generally thought that this, as Alice put it, this really new wave of generative AI development is going to be hugely significant.
Hey, John, I'm sorry to break in, but can you wrap it up?
Yes.
Quickly?
So,
Thank you.
I'll just say that for one word on each of these slides. A lot of faculty thought that we should adapt, but we're highly unsure. This was such an overwhelming theme in the open-ended response. I'm just not informed enough, not sure yet. So I think this is a really important challenge that we're reaching faculty and getting these conversations going. They did have some good ideas about how they could start using AI and a lot of concerns. So I'll just put that on the table as something that we can come back to in the discussion.
Sorry, I was muted. David, can you jump in with your perspective? Thank you.
Hey, everybody. David Wang. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Wilson Sonsini. For those of you guys that don't know us, we're the largest law firm in Silicon Valley, incorporated Google, took Apple IPO, fought Elon Musk for Twitter. That's kind of our MO. I was about 10-year practicing corporate attorney at Wilson. And before that, I was at Davis Polk. Gradually, and before that, I was an entrepreneur. So gradually made my way to the tech of law from the law of tech, so to speak. I think my perspective here that I can contribute, and Alice, thank you for inviting me, is that I'm the closest thing you have to, I think, a practitioner of this in, a real setting. We've been investing in AI since I think 2017. Kind of most well known as our investment in Lexion, and I was on the board of that company for a while. We were the first to apply generative AI in a contract context. And then so, independent of that, we've also done some work ourselves. We have our own data science team. We develop models, not generative ones, that we use ourselves that are more primitive, classical AI, shall we say, from 6 months ago. And we use them in deployment and in production. So, I have a team of technologists, engineers, data science folks that work on these types of things. And what we say is that we practice law on an industrial scale. There's way too much content to cover here, I think, for generative AI and essentially what it is. But I think I just want to say a few important points to me that are critical. I think number one is, the thing that I always say is, well, why aren't lawyers innovative? Why does the legal profession, and I think by extension, the legal education, not change very much over time, right? And I always say that the reason is that lawyers are overwhelmingly skeptical, maybe too skeptical. Lawyers always apply this beyond a reasonable doubt standard to new technology and new ways of doing things, which, obviously, folks here, that's not really the appropriate standard because we're not talking about a murder case, right? I think the difference that ChatGPT brought was that it was a self-evident, beyond a reasonable doubt demonstration of the capabilities. But that's really kind of just the first layer, right? What was it a demonstration of exactly? So for those of you that have some familiarity with software, it's ChatGPT is an application that uses large language models, i.e. the GPT, I think 3.5 at the time, but now I think it's primarily using 4. It's a chatbot, right? And what it was demonstrating to the audience is an ability for these large language models to have a natural conversation at a broad base with anybody on any topic, right? That is not really even a thin slice of what this technology is really about. And I think you have this phenomenon that this technology was really kind of improving rapidly underneath the surface, and then you had ChatGPT and it just kind of sent the hype curve up the wall. At the same time, generative AI has dramatically improved the underlying capabilities of the technology, but there's kind of now a huge distance between expectations and reality, right? People are expecting these things to be omniscient, essentially, right? And then, the world's most famous lawyer right now, right? The ChatGPT guy who submitted that brief in New York, everybody, a dozen people forwarded me that email in some context of, we can't even touch this thing. And I'm like, do you understand that is if I just Googled something online and copied and pasted it and submitted it as a brief without looking at it, that's basically what he did. So I think there's a very shallow understanding, but a very broad kind of awareness within the industry of this technology. And I think it behooves everybody, and especially legal educators, because you guys are the ones that are teaching the future, and young lawyers that are coming in through my door. We just had our summer academy, like last week, what this is about and what the impacts are. And we really need to get a little bit deeper than just that surface level. And that requires much more diligence and understanding of the technology, and really engaging with the actual applications of it in the complexities of practice as we have it, and not just like, oh, can ChatGPT do this or not? Or even, I'm sure Jake will tell you, well, just use case text, it solves all the problems. And so, final word is, I think that the way that I think about it is that there's a dam, okay, in the legal profession of the use of technology. All of the things like billable hour and the structure of law firms, et cetera, that prevents the effective application of technology. I don't know how high that dam is. More effective technology just raises the water level, and ChatGPT and the technologies that come with it has raised the level even faster. And so you have people like me that's trying to build like a hydroelectric generator without blowing up the dam, and you have people out there that are trying to blow up the dam, trying to disrupt the industry, right? And then Jake here, which I'll pass over to in a second, is trying to fill it with more water faster and faster, right? And so that's kind of what's happening out there in the industry in a nutshell.
Okay, Jake, I guess you're up to take it from there.
I'm last and least. So good to see everybody. My name's Jake. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called CaseText. And a bit of a context about us, and then a bit, kind of a few thoughts on generative AI. And I'll see if I can do this in under my time so that we can just get to questions. I'm sure everybody has many. We've been in business for 10 years now. Literally, as of about 5 days ago or so, we've been in business for 10 years. And the entire time, from the founding, the question has been, how might we use new and cutting edge technologies, and especially, as then discusses machine learning and natural language processing, to help improve the practice of law. And about 5 years ago, we started working on this then new technology called large language models and transformer-based neural networks. And at the time, they can only do so much. They help with things like search. The generative capacity of it was interesting, but then at that time wasn't super interesting. About a year ago, we got access to GPT-4, what we believe is the state-of-the-art cutting-edge model. At first in private and in secret, because the model was actually launched to the world of March 14th of this year. So we were kind of working on this for a little bit longer. And what we saw within our company, given our mission, was an extremely different set of capabilities that we thought, okay, this can do something dramatically different for this profession. And based on access to that model, we created a product then called Co-Counsel. The way to think about Co-Counsel is it's an AI legal assistant. So it's not meant to replace lawyers. It's just meant to help make your job easier. And what your interaction with this AI legal assistant, as crazy as this may sound for those of you who haven't seen it, is you're essentially delegating tasks to your assistant, and it will go and do those tasks for you and come back with an answer, both at an incredibly high level of accuracy. By incredibly high, I mean we haven't published much about this yet, but I mean, we're talking about superhuman accuracy, and also at insanely fast speeds. So to be specific, it's, for example, ask it a legal research question, and behind the scenes, it will take your question and turn that into a few dozen different legal research queries. It'll execute those queries against our daily updating database of cases, rules, regulations, and statutes, and pull back hundreds of cases. It will then read each of those cases and take the ones that it believes are irrelevant and push them to the side. And the ones that are relevant, it will start to synthesize that information into a memorandum it'll write for you. And that happens between 90 seconds to 3 minutes. And that's just one example. Other examples are things like, hey, read these 1 million documents for me and show me which ones have evidence of fraud. And the documents that talk about Club Fed, or this is a real example from a client working with, human reviewers missed email exchange about going to Club Fed, see you there, haha. The reviewers, not based in the States, did not understand the context. seems like a nice vacation destination if you're not, paying careful attention. But models like GPT-4 fully understood that Club Fed was federal prison and flagged this as a very highly relevant document. And those are just two of about a half dozen or so different capabilities, or what we call skills for co-counsel. And this is just the beginning. And what I'll say, to note it, is that exactly as David was saying, we've seen this underlying technology improve dramatically. ChatGPT is just the movie preview, it's just the appetizer. It is not the full extent of the capabilities here, and not necessarily the best way to use it in legal practice. What we've seen, on our side of things, working with us in industry, is that there are certain capabilities, certain skills that AI has today with today's current technology that exactly as Alice was saying, will, we believe, start shifting some work, frankly, some of the least interesting, exciting, and least challenging, intellectually challenging work. I think more and more of that will be done at the very least as a first cut by AI. And that'll happen probably the next 3 to 5 years, and kind of to be widely spread. To land on this note, I guess I took my whole 5. I think, this may sound bold to some of you, and some of you this may sound pedestrian, but I think that in about 5 years, a little bit more, a little bit less, every single practicing attorney will have an AI legal assistant. Not unlike we all use email and we all use the iPhone. This technology is just too powerful to not use. It would be like not using internet legal research, or again, those like smartphone or email-like technologies. And I'm saying that based on what we're seeing today with GPT-4. I can only imagine what's going to be enabled by the next versions of this technology, and how just incredibly accurate, fast, and intelligent this technology is.
Well, thank you, Jake, David, and John. That was all really interesting. I learned a lot from each of you. So I want to just talk more about how fast we think this is coming. So Jake, you gave us a pretty clear indication of how you believe. What about you, David? How do you see it impacting the associates at Wilson Sonsini? And I don't mean, and not only how, but how quickly?
Yeah, I think it's a really complicated question. Let me just try to terse out the most salient points I think that are most interesting from a legal education perspective. So I think number one is even before, generative AI, this was already kind of a salient issue. And by this, I mean the whole, and you alluded to this in your remarks, the training on the job thing, right? That we kind of expect from firms and employers of young attorneys that come in, that in essence, they're blank slate and they don't have any useful skills for the practice when they are starting in the first year. And that has been under pressure for a long time, right? And I think the reality was before that you had no other way of getting that stuff done internally. And so, firms would have them do that work and then essentially have a view on that's valuable training, and whatever the, we balance with the interest of the client and what they need, right? And kind of, but we're taking a huge loss on that, right? And always have. And really, with the advent of some of the automation and technology, and not even the going all the way to generative AI, a lot of that is now doable via some alternative means that are a fraction of the cost. And so now the calculation for people like me is, well, we still need to train these attorneys, but honestly, if we were just concerned about the delivery kind of technology, or really, if you think about like any good capitalist, I study Marx, right? It's the labor and capital thing. Like I could use the capital good to deliver that element of my business and that service at a fraction of the cost, much faster, always on, never needs to go on vacation, more accurately in many cases, right? But I still need to train my young lawyers. I still want to hire them, and I still need them to become senior associates and partners. So how do I deal with that problem? And I think this is just going to make it more acute. I think the number one challenge that I'm seeing right now, in at least our kind of still early investigations of the technology, is that it's very hard to measure and assess, and then to institutionally like stand behind the accuracy and effectiveness and predictability of the technology because of the way that these models actually work, because it's autoregressive, and like you could type in 2 prompts and you get 2 answers theoretically, right? I don't think that happens that often, but I've seen it happen myself, right? And so how do you do that? And as a profession that really don't measure quality or anything systematically very well, I think that's really going to be a problem, because the thing that I get asked with the automation tools that we deploy, some partner would inevitably ask me, it's like, well, what's the quality on this? Like, how do you know that it's any good? And I'm like, yeah, I think it's 100 times better than what we're doing before. And then he's like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I'm just guessing. But if you'd like to give me what the quality measures were that we did before, I'd be happy to compare it to that. Right. I mean, it's a joke, but it's some view of the reality of it. So I think the assistive element of it, when it is self-evident, I think that will come pretty quickly. I think Microsoft is going to launch like Copilot for Windows, or for Office, like within this year, maybe. And, they can get enough GPUs, which was actually an open question. But the legal particular questions, I have no doubt that some of the smartest minds are working on it. To that point, I actually don't know right now. I'm going to say that I'm agnostic, because I really don't know how we're going to do it. And it's a fascinating question that I'm very focused on.
Well, fair enough. There is so much uncertainty in this, as John said, and I think it's underlying all of us. But my sense is that very quickly that the first drafts of documents will be like the first draft of a contract or of a brief may be written by a machine. So, and then it seems to me that associates have to know how to edit a red line, et cetera, a first draft that they have never written. And so I'm wondering, actually, I guess I'm asking you, Jake, are you already using Copilot to draft, contracts or briefs?
It's an interesting question, kind of a few points here. The first is that in many ways, I actually think the drafting capabilities in generative AI are the least exciting. I think the most exciting, where you get what I call the most leverage for your time, is where you're having the AI read over, say, thousands of documents. For example, the thousands of cases it's going to read while it's doing legal research, or millions of documents in document review, or hundreds of thousands of contracts in contract review, or what have you. And so in some way, and we actually don't use in our application that much drafting stuff. It's not a big focus of the application of CoCounsel. And it's not something that, I use it all the time. I use ChatGPT all the time as part of work, like an insane amount of stuff we do at my company, as a first draft written by AI, to be totally clear. So as part of my day-to-day work, it's super useful. And I encourage lawyers to use, as David mentioned, like the AI capabilities that will be coming to Microsoft really any week now. I think that they're going to take over them, and Google will do a lot of the basic drafting stuff. In terms of, I think there's a deeper thing here that I think you bring up that's super interesting, which is whether it's through CoCounsel or Microsoft or Google or ChatGPT or whomever, it is absolutely the case that a lot of drafting, writing, work, review, research will be done as a first kind of cut by AI. That's going to happen. It is happening. And I think the interesting shift is making it so that attorneys understand that part of their job now is to be a good manager for this AI. It's a task of delegation. Are you being very clear in your instructions? Are you reviewing the work of your subordinate well? Are you giving it feedback and letting it iterate on the work that it's done in the past? That's increasingly the task of a good manager for your AI. And that's how we try to train the law firms and government entities and so on, and companies that subscribe to us. It's all about how do you manage. It's not unlike, frankly, managing a junior attorney. So even the junior attorneys using it are now managing a junior attorney, which is this AI, which means a lot of things, by the way. It's about, what you'll see, I think, in applications like ours and others, is citability is a very important piece. It will always say, not just like, here's the answer, but here's why I believe it's the answer. Here's the documents I read, here's the pages I read, here's the paragraphs I read. You can verify this yourself. Do that, the lawyer, the famous New York Times lawyer, right? Not New York Times, the famous lawyer who I was written about in the New York Times and other places, who filed um, the brief, was not being a good manager of his AI and had a bad junior attorney, so to speak, giving him bad kind of advice and feedback on what the cases are. And it just didn't understand technology deeply. And the real crime there, it's not crime's too strong a word, but the real problem there was a lack of oversight of junior assets, so to speak, in his employ.
Right, and maybe a lack of the partner's understanding of the limitation. Well, like maybe he didn't know that the guy was using the ChatGPT, but it's important for all lawyers, I think, to understand its limitations as well as its benefits, and therefore.
Yeah, and to check, just when we do a legal research memo, we'll say, here are the cases that it reviewed. Here's why we think this case is relevant. Here's how it's part of the answer. There's always a link. Open the case, read it.
Hasn't changed.
Yeah, has not changed. Will never change.
So, Jeff, do we want to open it up to questions at this point?
Well, I have to commend everyone for already not only posing questions, but also responding to them in turn, which has been great. There's been a nice chat going on and some questions have been answered. My sense from reading through the chat is that most have been addressed so far, but if you don't mind, as a consequence, I'd like to ask one question for all four people in the group. I think especially for Alice and John, but I'd also like to hear David and Jake's thoughts on this as well. Alice, you posed an initial question during your first intro about how can we fill this gap, right? There's a gap in instruction of the future lawyer. How can we fill that gap? And then, David gave us this nice metaphor of the dam, what's going to happen here. Certainly it suggests that there may be some change in the shape of the legal services industry. If you had a magic wand and you were to walk into a law school and say, hey, future lawyers, I have, swipe of my wand, one thing that I could change about the way that you're being taught. I'm just going to give examples here, but not trying to seed the answers. David mentioned the data science team at Wilson Sonsini. That's true of Wilson Sonsini. It's true of other places. Data science is not a part of a traditional law school curriculum. That might be one thing. It doesn't need to be anything so profound, but what would you do if you were to wave your wand and change something about legal education in order to better prepare future lawyers?
So I guess if I'm going to be the first one to jump off here, it would be that I believe technology should be included from the very beginning of 1L year. So even in the doctrinal courses, and not just in the using of technology, but understanding how technology is impacting the substance of all of these. Like, what is consideration? Okay, well, how's it being used today, and how is is tech changing that? But I also love what John did, which is using ChatGPT as just an introductory way. Students are going to be using this in their private lives, just like Jake and David said. I use it. I've used it actually I told my students I was doing this, but I used it to sort of make my class introduction in my syllabus more engaging. And I had my writing and then ChatGPT's, and it was considerably more engaging than a law professor. But I think that we just need to understand that it is a part of their lives, and we should begin to, as we're all comfortable with it, and over time, bring more and more of it into our teaching, both of how to think critically and also how the doctrine is changing because of technology.
Yeah, I can add a couple more thoughts there. I completely agree with Alice, and I think that's a good takeaway from my early experiments with incorporating some of these generative AI tools in the first year. I think the students are ahead of the faculty, which is an interesting dynamic, and that dynamic might really pick up steam with what's already been mentioned, the Microsoft Copilot GPT-4 integration. I imagine that maybe faculty will jump on board on this as well, but I think this is going to get very normalized from the student side, that when they're creating a document, if this Copilot system's anything like what they demoed back in March, you can have it reference files in a folder and have it produce drafts, and this seems like, and then iterate with it. in a way that I think will become very intuitive, and we will look like we're really falling behind as faculty if we're not catching up. LexisNexis is integrating GPT-4 and other leading LLMs. So I think that there traditionally has been a distinction between sort of tech law faculty, and it's been kind of a small cohort. And I don't think that we should hold that distinction with quite such a bright line anymore. I think we all need to be engaged, because this is, I think, a rare moment of really a transformative change. As much as I want to emphasize the uncertainty, I agree with the points that have been made that in the next few years that like AI assistants will become very normalized and things like that. I think that's entirely likely, and that the open questions have to do with just how transformative it will go beyond that, which I think we should remain very open-minded about. It's one of the big lessons from AI development in recent years, is that the biggest breakthroughs are very unexpected and not that well understood. And so I think we should teach to the uncertainty and help the students deal with this uncertain terrain. And probably the best way to do that is to put the tech in their hands, and while also having discussions, because there were so many misperceptions. So many students and faculty that I've talked to about this topic are still reacting to GPT 3.5, which, as we saw in the bar exam, is below the first percentile, as opposed to GPT-4. And so many have not seen case text co-counsel, right? Haven't seen what you can do if you actually, and I've signed up for it, and I've run, I've had it write briefs and memos, do research tasks with citations, and that's something most are not familiar with.
Yeah, I think again, this is the magic wand, right? I'm not saying that I know how to do this, but like I'd like to see kind of a reimagining of the clinic program in conjunction with technology programs. Because I think it's the thing that, like, and again, I'm dealing with this very practical question selfishly, right? Jake said something about supervising, like, it's like you're supervising a junior lawyer. And one thing that I've learned over my course of like managing lawyers as well as managing other people, like my whole career, it's very hard to manage what you don't understand. And it's very hard to be an effective manager when the person working for you knows more than you do about the thing that you're trying to manage. I have this problem with my engineers all the time, right? Because I'm trying to manage, but I'm like, I don't really understand what they do, and so it's always challenging, and you tend to be a bad manager because you make bad decisions. So can you make it so that when they graduate law school, they do know what they are doing in terms of it's, in some sense, I always like to say that this stuff changes everything, but in some sense it doesn't change anything. It just make our own contradictions and the problems in the legal profession more profound and obvious. Because what I like to see is that more law schools should open essentially pro bono nonprofit law firms. And from day one, they should be practicing, supervised, of course, but using technology directly. And then potentially not even doing it in a model that, the traditional legal businesses are doing things. And that both would help address some of the access to justice issues, as well as kind of the, because when you're looking at things from a kind of a fresh lens, as a young law student, I have so many of our innovation leaders. It's something that we have internally that I started, kind of Innovation Leaders Forum. It's always the younger attorneys that get it, right? They're just like, why, what? You want me to do what with my weekend? Right? Like, how is this even a reasonable thing? But they should start doing that in law school, and they should be doing that for 3 years in law school. I think the doctrinal essay style courses should just be that should be almost an afterthought and something that you do in parallel. And perhaps, you're shuffling them in one practice area to another, just like many big law firms have rotational programs. I don't know, we don't have this at Wilson, but at Dave Spoke they did, of you're kind of forced to do 4 different practice groups throughout the thing. And when you do that practice, you learn the doctrine at the same time and apply it, and then use technology. Maybe you A/B test it, but to me, that seems like a very obvious answer that I'm rather surprised that no law school is pursuing.
Well, we are, I think that's very intriguing. I do want to talk to you about a grant proposal that we have in at Duke Law School, so we should follow up on that, but we are a little over time right now. But I do want to give Jake a chance to do at least a fill in the blank on this question with the magic wand. Thank you, Jake, by the way, for being so prodigious in your responses to folks online. People are very intrigued by case text, but Jake, magic wand, what do you do?
On the education side? I think you do get in the hands of people early. I think I think David hit the nail on the head that you can't manage what you don't know. And so it's going to be, I actually think that we're going to see an up-leveling of the skill set necessary to be a great lawyer in working with this kind of AI. And I think it's going to be, not that most of our schools teach us anyways, but it's going to be, especially early education, coming out of law school, less about, hey, review these 1 million documents as part of a team of 20 people, that kind of stuff. It's already kind of going away to some degree. It's being outsourced and so on. It's going to be more about higher level. How do you actually win for a client in this context? I also think this is a totally different concept that only tangentially relates to education in a sense, but my prediction is that, and I think the reason I said 5 years for the AI assistant, by the way, is not because I don't think the technology is not going to be ready. I think it's just going to take a while for people to adopt it. Here's another thing that I think will take a while to change given the economics, but I think it will change, is that, to make a prediction here, maybe between 5 and 10 years from now, law firms will start deleveraging, which is to say that there are going to be fewer associates per partner. And the model, I think, will look a little bit more like the apprenticeships of old, where the point of the associate is not to bill, and get leverage for the firm. I think the purpose of a young associate is to be trained to have the expertise and judgment and intelligence and deep knowledge about the specific area that they're going to work on, led by a partner with that kind of experience and judgment and so on. So I think that's going to be another, and maybe that process starts in law school. I think this technology changes the economics of law practice, and that will have impacts kind of all the way down.
Really insightful. Well, here's what I'd like to do. Thank you all. First of all, this is really intriguing. You can tell from the chat that people are, their wheels are turning and that this is exciting for folks. I want to give people the right to, peel off, or at least the license to do so without feeling bad. Please do so. A few of our speakers said they can stick around for a couple of minutes if people want to have some chat. There's definitely some questions about the tools and their availability in law school. There are questions about career services. There are questions about managing, that concept of managing and working with business schools to maybe bolster legal education in that way, that are still floating out there. But because I want to keep things as close to time as possible, just wanted to say thank you. We can officially end it here. And if you're able to stick around for a couple of minutes, please feel free to do so. We'll end it soon and not hold on to these folks for too long, but they did offer a couple extra minutes. Thanks so much, everybody. We really appreciate it.
And Jeff, as people are kind of logging off, maybe one thing I can address to the crowd is, and I'll try to not answer just about case decks and co-counsel, but about AI generally is how do we get this in the hands of law students and young lawyers and so on, especially given, we kind of an insight here. We don't pay the API costs for OpenAI, and so we buy servers. But these servers are nearly $1 million a piece per year, a kind of expense. And so every time we add users, we also have to add servers, and they're very, very, very expensive. And so we can't, and I don't think the economics would be different for us and for others innovating in this space. I think they're currently extremely expensive. And so we haven't figured out a great solution to provide free or reduced cost access, as of course we want to populations like law schools. Except we have one idea, just throw it out there. And I'm curious, maybe afterwards, to get feedback from folks. In the early days of Weston Lexus, my understanding is they had terminals in the library as opposed to kind of everybody getting access. And one thing we probably can't support is buying a computer that will sit in the library and people can get access to co-counsel. That way we are constrained on the total number of students using at any given time, as opposed to kind of giving out a license to everybody. Because that's what really costs us a lot of money, is when a bunch of people are banging on the systems simultaneously. So that's one thing we're considering. We're trying to think out of the box here. We and I think, again, I want to speak broadly for the other companies also who are in this space, who are dealing with these currently high costs of doing it. trying to think about how do we get this in the hands of young lawyers and law students, you know. So still thinking through it a little bit.
That's great. And I'd love to, you know, there's a lot of savvy people, and including many, many librarians and others who are here. I'd love to hear if people have thoughts on that. People can feel free to chime in, respond in the chat, or raise your hand using the Zoom function if you want. But we might have to leave it with
smart. So
yeah, we had that is a brilliant comment already in the chat. So you're thinking along some good creative lines, it seems. Does anybody else want to have a question that they want to elevate, or anything that they wanted to chat with our panelists about? There's definitely the career services question that's floating out there about what this means for how we train folks to be ready to kind of hit the ground running. And then there's also the question that I saw before, I may have missed some, I apologize, about working with business schools. Oh, here's one from Colleen. She said, if there's one thing professors could do this year in their courses, what should it be?
Well, I think that completely banning ChatGPT is not going to help either the professors or the students grapple with this question. I think that just acknowledging it and having a policy around it that is more nuanced maybe than banning it is important, and maybe incorporating some use of, and again, ChatGPT is free. You can, you know, and I don't ask my students to use anything that they would have to pay for. And so, but they can access ChatGPT. And I think even doing that gives everyone a sense of what it's valuable for. I mean, I gave my students prompts, they could pick a prompt, and I asked them to put it into ChatGPT and then refine the prompt 3 times and then send me the results. And then after that, write their own paper based on those same prompts. And it was really, the students talked about how valuable that had been just to understand its limitations. There's nothing like using something. I think as David and Jake both said, to understand it, you have to use it. So I would encourage everyone to figure out some little way that you could do that.
I think my recommendation would be, I mentioned this on LinkedIn just kind of for this post. I'm like, you know, you guys are the ones with the power, right, in terms of administering these exams, and you're setting the standard for what is good and what is bad. And my question is, I would encourage you to at least take the exam, or try to use one of these tools to take the exam, and then or do some sort of blind grading. There's a couple of professors I saw too that where and if the result that you would get out of one of these tools is let's say above a median level of what your students would be producing, I think you really need to ask yourself the real hard question of am I teaching anything that actually has any value? Am I testing for anything that has any value commercially? Because you could go on a free website and punch in this thing and get something that's better than 50% of what people could do. I don't know if that's true for what you're doing. I've spoke to a couple of professors, one at Northwestern, I think one at I forget it, I think a Canadian law school who's done something similar, and they've have and I'm like, what are you testing for, and how do you devise new tests that actually test for skills that aren't completely commoditized, right? I mean, I'm not even certain today or by the time they graduate, but surely that is a very strong indication that it's not commercially very valuable.
Now, I've actually seen someone suggest that we should go back to oral exams, which I would love, but it would be logistically probably a nightmare, and especially in large classes.
So I'm aware of our time and how we're getting to the end here, and there's still some questions going on in the chat. But I just, for those who are still here, because I can feel the hunger for more information about this, I just wanted to highlight that coming up soon, including next week, there's another topic through this webinar series called Dispelling the Myths of ChatGPT and Promoting Its Critical Use. There's another topic on implementation of evidence-based teaching strategies with generative AI. There's the next week, legal standards for algorithmic decision-making, somebody's experience. There's the next one, integrating technology to better serve pro bono clients and law school clinic clients, much along the lines of what David was discussing with the clinics, and on and on and on. So just wanted to highlight that those are there, and we really encourage people to continue joining. There's been a wonderful turnout for this session as the semester or summer has gone on, and hopefully that can still happen. I don't want to keep our guests who've graciously given us their time already too long, so I'm going to go ahead and use the moderator's privilege to start to cut things off. But one more time, thank you to everybody. If there's opportunities for additional outreach, please feel free to reach out to us, at least to Tara and me on the panel. We can think about additional sessions if they are needed, but there's obvious hunger here. So anyway, wonderful questions, wonderful participation, really great insights. I took a flurry of notes and have a lot to share with my students based on this. So